So we'll get started. People can trickle in if they're still coming. But we thought it was fitting for the purpose of this topic of the book to do a land acknowledgement to honor the indigenous people who were here before immigrant families came. For those of you who don't know what a land acknowledgement is, it's a statement. It's often prepared in conjunction with a tribal group to acknowledge the people who are here and honor them who came before us. So for those of you who also don't know, we're on Lenni Lenape territory. They were the native people to this land. And as we move about in the environmental world, it's important, as Dr. Kimmerer makes a point in her book, to honor those people and their teachings and the way of seeing the world in our own knowledge. So this is from the Lenni Lenape tribal nation. And it reads, "The land upon which we gather is part of the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape called Lenape-Hoking. The Lenape people lived in harmony with one another upon this territory for thousands of years. During the colonial era and early federal period, many were moved west and north, but some also remain among the continuing historical tribal communities of the region. The Nanticoke Lenni Lenape tribal nation, the Ramapo Lenape nation, and the Powhatan Lenape Nation, the Nanticoke of Millsboro, Delaware, and the Lenape of Cheswold, Delaware. We acknowledge the Lenni Lenape as the original people of this land and their continuing relationship with their territory. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of the Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanend, that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land. Quote, as long as the rivers and the creeks flow and the sun and moon and stars shine." So as we move into our discussion, I ask that you keep that in the back of your head and have that guide your thinking in this as well. So thank you all for being here. I thought this was a fitting book for our Barnegat Bay circles because it talks about seeing the natural world in kind of two camps. One is through the Western science, natural history side of things, and the other being a more traditional way of knowing and honoring and seeing the world. And so Braiding Sweetgrass, I think, is a pretty beautiful conjunction of the two. She is a PhD in ecology, but she is also a woman of indigenous heritage. So this was an important book for me in kind of marrying those two ideas and finding meaning in them. So we have been talking a lot about conversations around justice and honoring diversity here in our office and in the work we do in the Jersey Shore region. And we felt this book was also fitting as we observe the changing of the seasons to have those conversations and expand our knowing around those issues. So as we all probably are aware, the concept of sustainability is really complex. It's not just the environment, but it also has to do with the people and our economy and our cultural spaces too. So I'm hoping that our conversations tonight will kind of build off of those ideas. And yeah, Dr. Kimmerer, we can reflect on this a bit, but she uses the concept of gratitude and the practicing of reciprocity as the way to enter into the world of engaging with the environment and finding sustainability and making lasting change. So I am interested to hear about what parts of the book resonated with you all, if there was a quote or a passage or something that stuck out. Maybe we can kick off our discussion with that, if anyone wants to go first. Grace Ann, I heard that you have something.
I do. So I am an environmental educator, right? That's what I do for a living, and that's where my passion is. And it happens to be something I like to say fairly okay at doing. And so the piece that really sat with me and really kind of touched me was the piece where Robin brings her students into the woods and they build the shelter, and they are experiencing the freshwater wetland and the marsh there, and understanding everything that the cattail plant contributes to the marsh, but also contributes to the needs of the folks that use them, these plants, to build shelter and make food and heal wounds. And there was just so much this one plant could contribute to, and kind of the evolution of, you know, she never put the students down. She never said, oh, well, they came in with this, wanting to use their iPhones or having these ideas. She never puts them down at all. She just, tells the story in such a beautiful way, and just kind of without putting them down, carries us through the conversation of their experience throughout, and kind of quoting them, and the laughter, and the appreciation, and the storytelling, and the bonding, and just this, kind of a little bit of the suffering. She talks about the bug bites and the sunburn and all that, but really it just sounds like something everyone should want to do. And she highlights at the very end that she wasn't sure that she made a impact with these students, and that maybe they had fun or they learned something, but did they really get it in their heart? And then the students are on their way home, and they're all singing a hymn that was related to what she was teaching them. And so there was just this true understanding that they got to, like, she was able to, in this beautiful way, share both her experience as an environmental educator and an indigenous educator, and this leader, where she is trying to lead but also trying to let nature around her lead. And she then has this satisfaction of these students that are just had to have been changed from this experience. And I found that to be really inspiring, so much so that I just realized and had some ideas of ways that I could incorporate that into our work at Save Barnegat Bay, and kind of continue that immersion. I'm often, like her, very excited to share all the information possible, because I think that that everyone needs to know everything all the time. But I think the beauty of this is really just allowing people to experience nature, and that be the teacher, that nature be the teacher. And she highlights that too. So that was something that really resonated with me.
Yeah, Grace Ann, that reminded me, I feel like a big part of her teaching in this book was the importance of wonder and how we interact with the natural world. And sometimes the most powerful thing is just being completely awestruck and at a loss of words at the beauty of nature. Sometimes that's even more powerful than having a set of data and numbers in front of you to explain something, and it can be an even greater teacher. And so in connecting back to the natural landscape we call home here, we have some of the most beautiful landscapes. We have bays and the Atlantic Ocean and wetlands and pinelands, and we're so lucky to live in a place like that. So really centering around these teachings that can be a little bit abstract, but in how we can link them back to our home here at the Jersey Shore. Susan, did you have anything that stuck out with you?
Well, Avery, I can only say yes to what you spoke about the awe and the wonder and the connection with nature. And I practice Qigong, and I do it outside. Well, I do it in a park twice a week, but I do it in my backyard as well. And the whole notion of gratitude, I am so grateful to be able to do that, first of all, from a physical standpoint. And I'm so grateful to be in the presence of the beauty that surrounds me. I live in, well, I guess you could even call it an oak grove. There's so many trees around here, and it's just really beautiful and awesome. And I always exchange energy as I'm drawing it up from the earth, doing the Qigong and bringing it up into the heavens, and bringing it from the heavens and bringing it down. And I have a tree that we moved here 20 years ago, and I have a tree that I call my elephant foot tree. It's a giant oak, and it has a base that looks like an elephant's foot, at least to me. So yes, her connection and the notion of reciprocity, that, I am gifted by all of the biosphere that surrounds me. I'm taking in their gift of oxygen, and in turn, I am providing them with carbon dioxide. What a beautiful and amazing concept, and what a recognition of the interconnectedness of all of nature.
Mhm.
So thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for sharing. That's something we talk a lot about here at the office, and I'll quote the wise Britta, who is on this call. She talks about how it's almost a little bit funny that we separate humans and the environment, is what we always say, when in reality, people are animals and animals are part of the earth and the ecosystem and all of its glory. So something that really resonates with me with Dr. Kimmerer's teaching is just this concept of, like you said, interconnectedness. And when we see a reflection of ourselves in the environment, it's harder to exploit it and take things away from it and feel like we have a right to something. I watched a talk with Dr. Kimmerer, and she talked about, I think she phrased it, you wouldn't go into your grandmother's house and just rifle through the cabinets to steal all her cookies and to look for them without asking. And she was saying, because that would be profoundly disrespectful. But for some reason, that's how we treat the earth when it gives us every life-sustaining force. So when we kind of shift our understanding on the individual, on the personal level, that works its way up the food chain to these bigger systems that are causing destruction to the environment and the natural world. So that's something that resonated with me. I was also really moved by the chapter when she talks about clearing out the pond for her daughters to swim in. I first read that chapter now years ago, and I think about it a lot because it's this very motherly instinct to get your hands dirty and to put your feet on the ground and really feel the earth around you, and to feel a sense of kinship and care with it. A big topic when I was first learning about this is the notion of a care ethic and this idea of stewardship, that we all have a stake in the survival of the environment. So that always just struck me as a really beautiful passage that she wrote about.
Do you recall the piece that she references? It's my memory is fogging me. Where she references the mother as being, I think it was in the teaching the students about being outdoors. She references Mother Earth as being like they were paying, like Mother Earth was taking care of them and they were taking care of her. There was some connection there. I don't remember the exact details. Do you?
I mean, that's just kind of the overarching teaching from the book that I got. She keeps referencing this notion of Sky Woman and the creation story of people, and how we're all kind of plucked from that original inception, you know? I'm not sure exactly from that passage. I wish I remembered the details.
I can't either, so.
I found that concept of Sky Woman was so beautiful, and the demonstration between Western concept and, going in the garden, and the garden, you got punished and thrown out, and, Sky Woman brought the garden. I loved that shifting and almost counterposition of both of those philosophical or cultural end points or beginning points.
Me too. It is so poetic to take something as abstract as the inception of everything we know here, and have this story to connect with it. Very
So
cool.
I see someone I recognize, Miss Irene. It's so good to see you. It's been so long. Did you read the book? Do you have a piece that's your favorite? Don't forget to unmute. You gotta unmute.
I was wondering if that was our Irene.
That's our Irene. Oops.
I don't know why my video didn't come on right away, but hello. I decided
to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you all. I decided to take the brazen leap and come, even though I wasn't like freshly with the book. I looked through, maybe about, I forget how long ago, less than a year, I guess. I looked through it, and I liked it a lot. But it was a kind of a superficial skimming, you know. And then lately, because I remembered your notice, and I tried to get it at the library, and it was out. I couldn't get it at my local, so too bad for me, but good sign that somebody was out there reading it. So anyway, I decided to come and just kind of listen in tonight, and and see what what I could learn.
Yeah,
And next time I'll be more of an active participant. So
that is okay. Hopefully we can have discussions no matter if you read it or not, because these are pretty universal concepts. So
yeah.
But I was just saying to Grace Ann today, this book has really taken off in recent years. When I first read it, I had never heard of it before, and I thought it was not a super well-known book, but Grace Ann found that it's one of the top non-sellers in the New York Times nonfiction list. So
Number 14.
yeah, so that's wonderful that this message is getting out there and resonating with people, because I think it can be applied to so many different places.
I'm gonna add some things, Avery, even though I didn't read the book.
Please.
Let me see if I can undo my screen here. Just thoughts to share, because I've been around the environmental movement for a long time, and I think one of the perhaps undervalued on the East Coast anyway, thoughts about the environmental movement is the spiritual side of things and that connection. If you go out west, people are much more in tune to those things. I think it's partly a reflection of the development, right? The more developed the area is, the more separated from nature people become. And so what I wanted to share is maybe 30 years ago or something, I was at a United Nations program. I was a young person, so it might have been 35 years ago. But anyway, we were discussing, arguing, debating, however you want to say, what the most important environmental issue was of the day. Now, this is like back in the early 80s. And everyone had an opinion. It was recycling, it was garbage, it was air pollution, it was climate change, it was all these things. And we had and there were students from all over the world at this program at the United Nations. And there was one student representing the Native Americans of North America. And he stood up and he said, the number one environmental issue is us, and that we should all really take some reflection about ourselves. And I know that really changed the course of the conversation at that time in the 1980s. And I'll just say that I think, in my reflection on these kinds of subjects, is the more separated we become ourselves as an animal from nature, the more alienated we are from ourselves. And it's really difficult to solve problems if you can't even be in tune with yourself and the things around you. So your reflections that you shared about just absorbing or taking a minute to appreciate nature and all its beauty, forget about studying it and measuring it and assessing it and all those other things. Now, we really are at the Jersey Shore and the edges of Barnegat Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, the pine lands. I mean, we're at the edge of all this beauty all of the time. So if you can run away from the pavement for a minute and take it in, even for lunch at a break or a local park, it's just so important to your own health and the planet. So that's really what I wanted to share. And I know, Irene, you have lots more to share, even though you didn't get to read the book.
Britta, what you said reminds me of a quote that I had written down from the book, and it was, "Action on behalf of life transforms because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal. It is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us." Which I think encapsulates this idea of reciprocity and practicing gratitude and awe and wonder all mixed in one. Because I think the moment we see ourselves as the earth and not in a separate entity, that's when we can really start moving forward with a lot of this work.
Agreed.
So I also, I watched so many talks from Dr. Kimmerer over the years because I really admire her as a person, as a teacher. And she talked about land as a number of different themes. So she had land as identity, land as a sustainer, land as ancestral connection, land as residence for non-human relatives, land as a source of knowledge, land as a moral responsibility, and land as a sacred vessel or a source of spirituality. So Britta also mentioned that in what she shared. So I'm just interested if any of those pillars resonate with any of you. What does that make you think of, maybe in terms of where we live and your connection to this natural region here? Maybe you have childhood memory if you grew up in this area or something that really sparked your interest or connection to this place.
I'll just share this. It was an interesting experience that we've all had through COVID. I think most of us alive on the planet have not experienced a pandemic like this before. Maybe a handful of folks are still around who experienced the first one, or the one here in the 1900s. But there was something that was said that really kind of made me wake up to the reality of the fact that in the city centers, they cannot sustain life there in the city centers. Like, we think that we're so high tech and really forward thinking, and there's all these, all this technology and fast movement, and there's all this job opportunities, and there's just so much going on in cities. But if you were to take away the supply of water from the aqueducts that feed New York from the northern rivers, and you were to take away the food being trucked in artificially on trucks and boats, and you were to take away the surrounding forests that make the oxygen and the ocean that makes the oxygen for the city itself would crumble. And so, I never really sat to think about that, and that the thing that really sustains the city is all of the space around the city that produces the food and the water and everything that humans and every animal on the planet needs to survive. So it makes perfect sense to me from that idea, and just in general, that land, there is nothing without land. There's an ocean full of animals, but you'd be surprised how many connections the landforms have with the bodies of water, and how important the nutrient movement is between the two. Neither can exist without the other. And so there's probably a lot more connections to the importance of land, actually. So one didn't necessarily resonate with me immediately, because I'm still exploring the ideas of the book, but I just feel strongly that kind of land is everything. And I think people have this arrogance about us, like humans have this arrogance that, we can build all this technology and, create all these solutions, but actually, like, nature has had these solutions and these things solved for a really long time. And the more we pave and engineer and change, the further we get from, like, healthy living, actually. So yeah, land is everything, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. In a talk I watched, Dr. Kimmerer talked about how everything we need to survive is provided for us, and that this misconception that we keep wanting more and that we're needing more is a largely Western mentality that arrived from marketing and consumption and industry. So it tricks our brains into thinking that we don't have all we need. And it's gotten us into some predicaments, I would say, on a societal level. Yeah, I can share a story. I was contemplating the idea of land as being a sacred thing. And I remember I went on a trip years ago to Montana, and I was on the back of a horse, and I was riding through the prairie, and we were out there all day, and I just had this moment where I felt something like in my chest, and I just started crying and watching the landscape before me and seeing all the little critters and birds come down. And it just felt like a profoundly spiritual experience. And I was probably in early high school, I would say. And that was the moment I decided I said to myself, I have to go into this for my life's work. It's the most beautiful thing before me, and I feel it within me. And it's funny looking back because I was a little bit naive as to what all of that work involved because I was just a teenager. But that would be the closest thing I have felt to a spiritual experience, is always in relation to a beautiful landscape before me. And something we discussed a lot in college was that the notion that landscapes also have to be this really vast wilderness expanse doesn't necessarily have to be. And so that in a lot of ways has kept people out of feeling connected to the environmental movement. And once we start to see nature and land as the green patch on our street corner, or the space where people come together, even maybe in an urban center where there's a single tree, once we start seeing those places as nature, we can all feel like we have more access and entry to them, and which I think is really cool. And that also has been grounded in a lot of indigenous teachings as well.
Avery, you made me think of something, which is, there's been this effort by Ocean County and a variety of tourism, related searches and surveys and industries to talk about, well, why do people come to the Jersey Shore? Why do they destination vacation here? And over time, some people have said, well, it's for the restaurants. That's what it's about. And you can kind of laugh because, well, we have nice restaurants. If you live in Manhattan or Philadelphia, you probably have really nice restaurants. So it's probably not the restaurants, right? The things that people come here for, in my opinion, is those open spaces, those views, those landscapes, like you were saying, that touch them in such a way they can't achieve that in an urban center where you can only look a couple 100 feet across the street and you see a second set of homes or another building or hardened concrete area. When you come here, you can see an expanse of land. You can see open space. You can sit at the coastline and see this huge ocean and beautiful landscape in front of you. And I think it actually touches each and every tourist who comes to visit this space in that deep, fundamental, spiritual way. Whether they can articulate that, they call it memories, right? They had a memory with grandpa fishing or crabbing down at the bay, or going to the beach and sunbathing with mom, or these things. But actually, they're just a human Homo sapien animal who's connecting with this larger experience that they really can't fully identify. It's not about the Pepsi Cola in the throwaway cup. It's really, not to pick on Pepsi, but it's not about those things, and it's probably not even about the dinner that they had at a local restaurant. You hope that's part of it, but your experience in the West, out in Montana, is, I think, what every visitor to the Jersey Shore actually is experiencing when they come here.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And also thinking about cultural connection to place and land as a sustainer of that. The New Jersey Shore has an abundant, diverse, vibrant community of people who make up the environment here too. I'm sure a lot of you, if not all of you, have the same memories that date back years that are tied to this place. So there's something really special here that we need to sustain and we need to be stewards for. And so this book, thinking about it in the context of my life here and my work here, has been a helpful guide in that as well, in channeling my thinking.
I think that this book was almost a meditative book for me. Mm-hmm. Reminded me in a much larger version of Gift from the Sea by Anne Morrow Lindbergh, which is a series of 6 or 7 essays. And this was a much longer book, but I found myself just putting it down after I'd read a part of it, and just sort of just thinking about, you know, how we need to slow down, how we need to appreciate ourselves, how we need to appreciate what's among us. And I would think that, for instance, Irene, you don't have to read the whole book in order to get the picture. It is a, what would you call it, a pick up, put down book. And you could read it, I could read it today, and I could read it 5 years from now and still have that same feeling of wonder, and just pause. And some days it might be better than others. You know, when you read Gift from the Sea, some days you think, what am I reading? And then you pick it up a year later and you think, whoa, you know, there I am. And that's what I appreciated most about it.
I love that Gifts of the Sea book too.
That's a absolutely wonderful book. And this was very reminiscent of that.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a lot of really universal experiences. I had that experience out in Montana, but I have it here too. Every time I drive over Causeway onto Long Beach Island, I get the same type of emotional. And so, yeah, it's a guiding principle on how we should be grateful for where we are standing on, and building this sense of place in a region of the country that has a lot of seasonal folks, people who kind of move in and out of here. It's important that we feel connected to here if we want any chance at saving it in whatever way that may be. Because when you feel connected to something, you feel empowered to speak up for it. So yeah, I also wanted to mention the notion of seventh generation stewardship. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that word. You've probably heard of maybe the brand seventh generation. That's also an indigenous teaching, and it's based on making decisions and viewing the world with an outlook for the children who have yet to be born, the people who are 7 generations ahead of us, and creating a world for them that we want them to feel safe in and be able to survive in. And so Dr. Kimmerer brings up the idea of becoming indigenous to a place. And she says, for all of us, becoming indigenous to a place means living as if your children's future mattered, to take care of the land as if our lives, both material and spiritual, depended on it. And so I wanted to kind of segue the conversation into, you know, the conversation around climate and the environment can be really scary and daunting. For someone like me, who has quite a bit of time ahead of me to be dealing with it, it can be really doomsday-y. But she kind of lays out a roadmap of how to find meaning in the moment where we're living, and to keep moving forward to care for the world and have it be here for 7 generations ahead of us. So she says, this set of grave errors is transitory. It has to be. That was from a talk I watched, and she was talking about how this overproduction, this exploitation of resources can just be a blip in the time scale if we realize that we need to change our ways and that we need to connect with Earth in a different way. So yeah, her roadmap to this was first becoming connected and feeling a sense of empowerment to be a steward for where you're standing on. And I guess I just wanted to put it out there that that was something that gave me a lot of solace in moving ahead in this type of work as a person in this world. So yeah, I was hoping to kind of open up the floor to talk about maybe how these ideas are all jumping around in your minds. I know Grace Ann and I have this conversation a lot at the office, not to pick on you, Grace Ann. But yeah, just how do you find meaning in all of this, kind of moving forward as an action step of sorts? Also, feel free to take time to think on that. That was a big idea I threw out there.
Well, Avery, I'll just say I felt the same way in terms of her attitude of hope. I felt a sense of hope, whereas some of the other books that I've read, I have read books with water spirit, and they're pretty scary, and you know, almost like, uh-oh, it's a little too late. But she never gives that feeling or that sense. I found her writing to be hopeful. And, you know, I think back to when I was younger and the first Earth Day, and I was in college, and how yippee ki-yo, it was so wonderful. I was really grateful for that. And I went to William Patterson, and Montclair had started their program in environmental science, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm here in nursing, environmental science, but I personally stuck with the nursing, and just did my best. And one of the things that I look at, and I can see that I'm doing something, though, I have a lot more that I recycle than I put in the trash. And so if I see more trash, which I hope never to, and somebody came over to our house and they said, "You're putting your trash out tomorrow? I only saw one bag in there." and I had to laugh, because if they had lifted the lid on the recycling bin, it would have been a different story. And I regret to say, it's true. I do put my trash in a plastic bag. Please forgive me.
That might be tricky to avoid. I'm definitely guilty of that one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more aware we become of all these issues, especially the younger generations, and I don't know how the trajectory was for those of you that have been around, you know, kind of taken a few more laps around the sun than we have, but the more aware we become, the more burdened with guilt we become, and it gets really difficult to make smart decisions about what we should do, and we start wasting our time and our effort and our talent, like basically micromanaging our lives because we're so afraid of throwing the wrong thing away or buying the wrong thing, and we just spend so much time and mental and emotional energy to sort this stuff out. And it's almost unfair at some level because, you know, the burden shouldn't be on us, but that's a whole different conversation. So I think feeling empowered to make good choices that are big choices. I think Britta really kind of was one of the people, and of course, you know, Greg and others, you know, have really influenced me to kind of say, stop nitpicking the little details. Don't worry about the disposable, you know, piece of cutlery that you have to use once because it's convenient and you're not going home to wash your dishes, like whatever the thing is, like focus on pushing the big initiatives. And so before I worked at Barnegat Bay, not long before, I wasn't a voting member of society. It was not something that was valued among the people I grew up with. It was just something I didn't understand or know to be important. And then all of a sudden I had some breakthrough, whatever, school, university, I don't remember when it happened, but I realized that if I wasn't speaking up for the thing, then who was? And like I was busy doing all these little things that I thought were good in my personal space, like maybe trying to eliminate plastic, but really was I having an impact on the scale of things that I could? And so I think kind of segueing away from the trash bag being plastic, I think we focus on those things and it distracts us actually. And the media has learned to distract us with that thing, with those things, to put the burden on us to worry about those details, when really we should be focusing our mental, emotional, and physical efforts at these larger ideas, which is to, you know, change the way the infrastructure is built that we use to get rid of waste or whatever the thing is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that brings up an important point of awareness, and connection to these things begins on the personal level. And then from that step forward, we need to all be leaders in coming together around these issues. is our civic duty with voting. It is showing up in spaces that we care about. It is being a leader in whatever way we can as a collective, to form kind of this united front about these really big existential ideas. If we're going to take an issue of a changing world as the biggest issue or most existential threat of our time, we really need to come together and get on the same page with that. Yeah, I remember Dr. Kimmerer said that despair is a way of accepting powerlessness in a sense, and that the alternative to that is engaging in hope, and hope that we can come together and hope that we can have this shared connection with this world we call home in whatever capacity that may be. And like you mentioned, the first Earth Day was kind of the blossoming of that modern movement that we're seeing, bringing that conversation to the mainstream. And I think it's taking turns in new ways too, as we are well into the 21st century now and engaging in even more modern environmental conversations about what our place is in all of this. So yeah, I hope that you
Irene
all,
wanted to share something.
yeah.
Just kind of underscoring the idea that really policy change, big policy change, I think is key. You know, we can do what we do in our everyday lives, and that's important, but you know, for things to really the big decisions, you know, the big policies changed. Otherwise, you know, and also the idea too is that you know, keep in mind, like everybody, you know, when people start to feel guilty and stuff, remember you're one person, and you know, you're not in charge of saving. You can't. One person can do as much as one person can do. You know, so it's not to take too much, not to take the guilt, you know, on yourself. It's like that is a waste of your energy as well. You know, keep in mind what you want. Keep in mind what you want to work on. You know, there's so much you can do. Be focused, and you know, go for trying to get the big things changed and what you can do in your life, and talk to people. That's what I think.
I get really frustrated sometimes when folks get really kind of doomed-dommy and they're like, oh, like we're never going to change things, or it's all gone to hell, or whatever. I don't know. And it makes me really frustrated. I'm like, I'm younger than 30. I'm just beginning my career. Like, if I don't have hope in this whole thing, what's the point of my life's work? Like, it doesn't, should I just give up? You know, it can be, you know, you kind of have this internal crisis of like, have I chosen to do something that actually has, you know, little to no meaning because, you know, someone's trying to say that there's no way to change it. And I get really frustrated. I'm like, that's not true. That's not the case. And I'm gonna keep plowing on with hope because that's all I can use. Hope. That's it. I need hope to continue forward.
Not that there isn't, you know, a lot to feel bad about, and not to say that you shouldn't, you know, oh no, I'm never going to feel bad. No, you can feel bad, but like, don't stay there too long, you know, just, and then move on. That's what I think.
I also think that from my age group, when we're well beyond turning around the world a couple times, the earth, is that if we didn't have you youth up there and being active, we would be more depressed. I mean, we would really chop off our heads, because, you know, as we look at the picture of the environment and what's going on and what's not happening, and, you know, I mean, I realize that some of my generation is the cause of some of this, but those of us who've been fighting right along realize that our time we're limited now. And if I didn't have faith in the youth of this country, I mean, I would just stop. I would give up. So my hat's off to you all, and you all keep fighting, because You know, we feel, we elderly people feel strongly that that's the only way it's going to fly.
Yeah. Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about the importance of recognizing grief in all of this, which is something that resonates with me also because, you know, when we see something changing, when it's different from my childhood memory of what a place would be, and I'm sure you all have seen this in your own lives, it's okay to feel sad that change is happening. Like Grace Ann mentioned, we don't have to act like everything is hunky-dory with all of this because we are in a situation where we need to take actionable steps to make things better. And so it's cathartic, you know, we recognize that grief and then we organize. And so that's what I've been kind of reconciling with what my place in all of that is. Yeah, it makes me feel whole to be part of an organization that's so grassroots, that is so connected to the community here because I see people every day that we are working alongside and who is partners with us in this big fight. I think it takes all of these smaller groups coming together to form that bigger coalition. And that gives me a lot of hope.
Avery,
I just-
am I
Go
stepping over?
ahead, Britta. Go ahead.
I was going to add that 2 thoughts, if I can keep them in my head. One is, in some ways, in terms of the community, we have to meet them where they are because so many people are entering this conversation in different ways and different spaces and at different levels of understanding. And I think oftentimes we miss reaching them and engaging them in the conversation because we expect them to be further along, you know, in their thoughts, maybe, which is challenging, right? Because you have to turn around and try to bring somebody along the spectrum of thought. And currently the political dialogue in the country, you know, is such a way that it is crafted to alienate us, you know, from a healthy conversation. So just wanted to bring that up, that, you know, we have to try to meet others in the community where they are, how they're entering the conversation and the level of understanding that they're at. And the second thought that I wanted to share, and I don't know if the author talks about that, but the second thought I wanted to share is that nature is very resilient. And I often participate in environmental programs where, in conclusion, my environmental colleagues will say, well, you know, nature's going to win. And what they're forgetting is that we are a part of that nature. And really the right thought, I think, or the more accurate, is that nature is very resilient, including us. And, you know, at the end of the day, we can heal, we can get better, we can help each other, and we can help the nature that supports us. So just that thought that nature always comes back if it's given a chance, and that's what we really need to focus on, is giving it a chance. Those are two thoughts I want to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess unless anyone else has anything to say, this seems like kind of a fitting note to wrap up our discussion on. As I mentioned, I at least personally don't like reading these things and feeling like it's apocalyptic and the world is falling down around me. I like to feel a sense of purpose and action in my step after reading it. So I want to put out, maybe for you to ruminate on after this discussion ends. Dr. Kimmerer says to act out of love, to fiercely defend with everything that's left in me. And so I invite you all to contemplate maybe how that applies to your life here in New Jersey, if that's where you are. What it means for you as a person moving around these natural spaces that we're so lucky to have in our backyard. So yeah, if anyone has any final thoughts.
I
Well,
just want to, oh,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just want to say thank you very much, Avery. Thank you, Grace Ann. Thank you to Britta and all of the people who are involved with Save Barnegat Bay, and for the opportunity to participate in this particular book club, in this particular reading. I really appreciate it very much. And thank you. And I do have to go, but thank you so much. This was a delight. And I hope to be more involved as time goes on. Woo.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Marcy,
Thank you.
Has anybody read any of her other novels?
I haven't, just this one.
Has
Have you read-
anybody? No, I haven't, but has anybody listened to this on audio?
Yeah.
Raysan?
Oh,
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed hearing her voice and of course, learning, she enunciated all of the native words so beautifully. And it was just music to my ears to hear her read her own novel. And it was just so soothing. And I would love to meet her in person. Everybody I talked to after I read this, I recommended like both reading it and then listening to it, because both have their own like pros and cons. I mean, when you look at a big novel, you think, oh, I don't know if I can have time to read all that. But I couldn't put it down. And I just picked it up out of the blue. Like I perused like the nature section and I just found that, and I love braids. So I just picked it up randomly. And once I did and went online, I went on Facebook and saw that she self-published it, and it went nowhere for so long. And I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't until I think 9 or 10 years later that it became popular.
Mhm.
So I'm so looking forward to reading one of her other books.
Did you hear our announcement about on Thursday, she's doing a virtual talk?
Oh, she is.
Yeah, it's through NYU, but it's
I
a public event.
Okay. Yes, I signed up for it. I knew it was
Okay.
through NYU, but I didn't read the part that she was actually going to be presenting.
Yeah, it's through NYU Reads. So it sounds like you would enjoy her
Yes,
talking
yes.
about it too, because of course it's important to listen to Indigenous people speak firsthand about their stories. And so, yeah.
Avery, can you put that in the chat, the sign
Yeah.
up for everybody? And I'll just say, to fill in the space where Avery's multitasking, if anyone feels inclined that they want to express their need to advocate for the local environment, I mean, obviously we'd love to have you in the fold to save Barnegat Bay in whatever capacity you feel you want to be there. But I would encourage you to reach out to any environmental group that you feel moved by, because I think that's a really great way for you to express that need and that desire, and that kind of when you're inspired to act or advocate for something, the best thing to do is to team up with folks who are already doing that. So I think if this book moved you, and in that way, I encourage you to reach out to us. SaveBarnegatBay.org is our website, and we try really hard to keep it all updated, but frankly, there's a lot going on that doesn't end up there. So definitely reach out to us if there's something that you feel inspired by.
Right.
Yeah. And it was wonderful to hear that you were recommending this book to your friends too.
Oh, everybody. It was
yeah.
just, I don't know, just the rhythm of her voice was just beautiful, and the tonation and just, of course, hearing her speak her native language. I actually kept stopping it and saying it out loud, and I couldn't get it right, but yeah.
Yeah. And like continuing those conversations with your friends, family, and circles is important too, as we expand this conversation around justice and equity and who has a seat at the table around these conversations and environmental work. It's important. So I hope that you all found that it sounds like you did, that this was a meaningful bit of that conversation to kind of kick off our own thinking.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you
be
for
back.
being here, everyone. Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful rest of your night.
You too.
Thank you.